The bank was closed. Margaret Chen stood on the sidewalk outside Pacific Heritage Savings and Loan, her hand pressed against the glass door. Inside, the lights were off. There was a paper taped to the inside of the window. White, standard office paper. Someone had printed it quickly. The ink was smeared in one corner. Federal bank examiners have taken possession of this institution. All deposits are frozen pending investigation. For information, call 1-800-555-0147. Margaret read it 3 times. Her breath fogged the glass. It was 8:47 in the morning, Tuesday, September 13th, 1989. She had been standing there for 12 minutes. Other people were gathering now. A man in a suit, a woman with a baby stroller, an elderly couple holding hands. They all had the same look on their faces. Confusion first, then understanding, then something that looked like falling. Margaret felt it too. The ground shifting beneath her feet. She had $43,716 in that bank. 19 years of savings. Every dollar. She kept the passbook in her purse. She took it out now. The last entry was from 2 weeks ago. A deposit of $68. Her hands were shaking. The passbook fell. It landed on the concrete. The woman with the stroller picked it up. She handed it back to Margaret. She said something. Margaret did not hear her. She was looking at the numbers. $43,716. Written in blue ink. Official. Real. Except it was not real anymore. The paper in the window said frozen. Margaret knew what that meant. She had come to America when she was 23. She had learned English from television and library books. She knew words like frozen and investigation and pending. She knew what they meant when banks used them. They meant gone. Margaret Chen was 42 years old. She had lived in Los Angeles for 19 years. Before that, she had lived in Guangzhou, China. She had left behind her parents, her 2 younger brothers, and her daughter. Her daughter's name was Lily. Lily was 4 years old when Margaret left. She was 23 now. Margaret had not seen her in 19 years. That was the plan. Go to America, work, save money, bring Lily over, give her opportunities, give her a future. Margaret arrived in Los Angeles on March 7, 1970. She had $62 in her pocket and an address for a cousin who had immigrated 3 years earlier. The cousin let her sleep on the floor of a 1-bedroom apartment in Chinatown. There were 5 other people living there, 2 families. Margaret paid $40 a month. She found work cleaning office buildings, night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 days a week, sometimes 6, $7 an hour. No benefits, no contract, cash at the end of each week. She worked for a company called Diamond Cleaning Services. They hired immigrants who did not ask questions. Margaret did not ask questions. She cleaned, office after office, floor after floor. She emptied trash cans. She vacuumed carpets. She scrubbed toilets. She wiped down desks where important people made important decisions during the day. At night, the offices were empty. Just Margaret and the hum of fluorescent lights and the smell of chemical cleaners. She worked alone. She liked it that way. No one bothered her. No one asked where she was from or why her English was broken or where her papers were. She just cleaned. After 2 years, she moved out of her cousin's apartment. She found a room in a boarding house on Alpine Street. $120 a month. She had her own door, her own lock, her own window. The room was 8 feet by 10 feet. There was a bed, a small table, a hot plate, and a mini refrigerage that made a grinding noise all night. The bathroom was down the hall, shared with 11 other tenants. Margaret did not care. It was hers. She kept it immaculate. She worked. She saved. Every week, she cashed her paycheck and kept $40 for food and expenses. The rest went into a coffee can under her bed. After 6 months, the coffee can held $900. Margaret took it to Pacific Heritage Savings and Loan. The bank was 3 blocks from her boarding house. It was small, local. The woman at the front desk spoke Cantonese. Her name was Mrs. Wu. She helped Margaret open a savings account. Margaret deposited $850. She kept $50 for emergencies. Mrs. Wu gave her a passbook, a small blue book with her name printed inside. Margaret Chen. Account number 44729. Balance $850. Margaret held the passbook like it was made of glass. Mrs. Wu smiled. She said congratulations. She said Margaret was smart to save. Margaret asked how long it would take to save enough to bring her daughter to America. Mrs. Wu asked how much she needed. Margaret said she did not know. Maybe $10,000. For the application fees, the lawyer, the plane ticket, the deposit for a bigger apartment. Mrs. Wu nodded. She did some math on a piece of paper. She said if Margaret saved $200 a month, it would take about 4 years. Margaret said she would save more. Mrs. Wu said to be careful. Life was expensive. Margaret said she would be careful. She would also be fast. Her daughter was 6 years old. She was growing up without her mother. 4 years was already too long. Margaret worked 2 jobs, the cleaning company at night, and during the day, she found work at a garment factory in the fashion district. She sewed buttons onto shirts. $12 for every 100 shirts. On a good day, she could finish 400 shirts. $48. But her hands cramped. Her fingers bled. The supervisor, a man named Mr. Park, said if she was too slow, he would find someone faster. There were always people waiting for work. Margaret was not too slow. She worked through the pain. She taped her fingers when they split. She soaked her hands in ice water during her 10-minute lunch break. She finished 400 shirts a day, sometimes 500. She worked at the factory from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Then she went home. She ate rice and vegetables. She slept for 3 hours. She woke up at 9:30 p.m. She took the bus to the office buildings. She cleaned until 6 a.m. She took the bus home. She slept until 7:30 a.m. She started again, 7 days a week, for 3 years. She saved. Every month she deposited into her account at Pacific Heritage, $200, then $300, then $400. Mrs. Wu watched the balance grow. She said Margaret was remarkable. Margaret said she was just a mother. In 1975, Margaret's balance reached $12,000. She went to an immigration lawyer, a man in a cramped office above a noodle shop. He had stacks of files on his desk and a picture of his family on the wall. 3 daughters. He listened to Margaret's situation. He said it would cost $18,000, maybe $20,000. The process took time. There were forms, applications, background checks, interviews, delays, always delays. Margaret asked how long. The lawyer said 3 years, maybe 4. Margaret felt something crack inside her chest. Her daughter would be 14 by then, almost grown. But she had no choice. She said, okay. She would save $18,000. The lawyer nodded. He gave her a list of documents she would need. Birth certificates, marriage certificates, even though there was no husband, divorce papers, proof of residency, proof of income, photos, letters. Margaret took the list. She folded it carefully. She put it in her purse next to her passbook. She went back to work. The years blurred together. Work and sleep and work again. Margaret stopped celebrating her birthday. She stopped noticing holidays. Time was measured differently now. Not in days or months, in dollars. Every dollar was a day closer to Lily. Every $100 was a week. Every 1,000 was a month. By 1980, she had saved $21,000. She went back to the lawyer. He had moved offices. The new place was bigger. He had a secretary now. Margaret gave him the documents. All of them. Everything on the list. He said he would start the application. He said to be patient. Margaret said she had been patient for 10 years. The lawyer said immigration was complicated, especially for people from China. The quotas were small. The waiting lists were long. But he would do his best. Margaret paid him $5,000. A retainer. She watched the money leave her account. She felt sick, but it was progress. It was movement. The application was submitted in January 1981. Margaret waited. She called the lawyer every month. He said there was no news. These things took time. Margaret kept working. She had been cleaning offices for 11 years. Her back hurt constantly. Her knees were bad. She could not stand for long periods without pain. She started taking ibuprofen every day. 4 pills in the morning, 4 at night. It helped. A little. She kept sewing buttons. Her hands were permanently scarred. The calluses were so thick she could barely feel the fabric anymore. But she was fast. Faster than anyone else in the factory. Mr. Park gave her more work. 600 shirts a day. Sometimes 700. Margaret did not complain. More shirts meant more money. More money meant Lily. She saved every extra dollar. By 1984, her balance at Pacific Heritage was $33,000. The lawyer called. There was movement on the application. An interview had been scheduled. In Guangzhou. For Lily, Margaret would need to send money for her daughter's travel to the consulate. $500. Margaret sent it. The interview happened. The lawyer called again. It went well. But there was a problem. A background check issue. Something about Margaret's documentation. It would take time to resolve. Maybe a year. Margaret asked what the problem was. The lawyer said he was not sure. The government did not always explain. Margaret asked if she needed to pay more money. The lawyer said not yet. Just wait. Margaret waited. By 1987, the balance was $39,000. The lawyer called with bad news. The application had been denied. A clerical error. A form that had been filled out incorrectly. It was the lawyer's fault. He was very sorry. But the good news was, they could reapply. Start the process over. It would cost another $5,000. Margaret wanted to scream. She wanted to throw the phone. She wanted to cry. But she did not do any of those things. She said okay. She paid the $5,000. The new application was submitted. Margaret was 40 years old. She had been in America for 17 years. Her daughter was 21, an adult. Margaret had missed everything. First steps, first words, first day of school, graduations, birthdays, everything. She had photos. Her parents sent them in letters. Lily as a child. Lily as a teenager. Lily as a young woman. Margaret kept the photos in a shoebox under her bed next to her passbook. She looked at them every night before she slept. She tried to memorize her daughter's face. She tried to imagine what her voice sounded like. She tried to picture what they would say to each other when they finally met again. But the years had created a distance that was more than geographic. Margaret had left a 4-year-old. She would be reuniting with a stranger. She pushed the thought away. It did not matter. Lily was her daughter. They would find their way back to each other. They had to. By 1989, Margaret's balance had reached $43,716. 19 years of work, 19 years of sacrifice. The lawyer said the new application looked promising. There was an interview scheduled for October. Just one more month. Margaret allowed herself to hope. She started looking at apartments. 2-bedroom places. She found one in Monterey Park. $850 a month. More than she had ever paid for rent. But it had 2 bedrooms. One for her. One for Lily. She imagined cooking meals for her daughter. Teaching her to make dumplings. Going to the grocery store together. Ordinary things. Mother and daughter things. Things they should have been doing for 19 years. Margaret went to Pacific Heritage on September 12th to deposit her latest savings. $68. Mrs. Wu was not there. A younger woman helped her. The transaction took 2 minutes. Margaret walked home with her passbook. The balance was $43,716. She smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in weeks. Just one more month. The next morning, the bank was closed. Margaret stood outside Pacific Heritage for 2 hours. More people came. Then reporters. Television cameras. Someone said the bank president had been arrested. Someone else said there was fraud. Millions of dollars. Hundreds of depositors affected. Margaret listened to the words, but could not process them. Fraud. Arrested. Millions. What did any of that mean for her $43,000? What did it mean for Lily? A man with a microphone approached her. He said he was from Channel 7 News. He asked if she was a depositor. Margaret nodded. He asked how much she had in the bank. Margaret said 19 years. The reporter looked confused. He asked again, "How much money?" Margaret said 43,000. The reporter's face changed. Sympathy. He asked if she could tell her story on camera. Margaret shook her head. She walked away. She took the bus home. She sat on her bed. She took out the shoebox. She looked at the photos of Lily. A 4-year-old with pigtails. A 7-year-old missing 2 front teeth. A 12-year-old in a school uniform. A 16-year-old who looked so much like Margaret it hurt. A 21-year-old woman who Margaret barely recognized. She put the photos back. She lay down. She did not cry. She felt empty. hollow, like someone had reached inside her chest and removed something vital. She stayed in bed for 3 days. She did not eat. She did not go to work. On the 4th day, there was a knock on her door. It was her landlord. He said rent was due. Margaret paid him. She had $53 left. She went back to work. The news came out slowly over the following weeks. Pacific Heritage Savings and Loan had been engaged in massive fraud for at least 5 years. The bank president, a man named Richard Westin, had been making illegal loans to his business partners, real estate developers who were building projects that did not exist. The loans were never repaid. The money simply vanished. To cover the losses, Westin had been falsifying records, making it look like the bank was profitable when it was actually insolvent. Auditors had been bribed. Regulators had been misled. By the time federal examiners discovered the fraud, over $47 million were missing. There were 638 depositors. Most of them were immigrants: Chinese, Vietnamese, Filipino, Mexican, people who worked in restaurants and factories, people who cleaned houses and drove taxis, people who saved every dollar because they had dreams. Dreams of bringing family members to America, dreams of opening businesses, dreams of buying homes, dreams of retirement. All of those dreams had been in Pacific Heritage Savings and Loan, and Richard Westin had stolen them. The FDIC insurance covered deposits up to $100,000. But there was a problem. Pacific Heritage was not FDIC insured. Westin had let the insurance lapse 3 years earlier. He had told depositors the bank was insured. He had even given them fake FDIC stickers for their passbooks. Mrs. Wu, the friendly woman who had helped Margaret open her account, had believed they were insured. She had lost her savings too, $22,000. Her retirement. She was 68 years old, too old to start over. She had a heart attack 2 weeks after the bank closed. She died in the hospital. Margaret went to the funeral. The small chapel was full of Pacific Heritage depositors, people Margaret recognized from the bank. All of them wore the same expression: loss, rage, despair. Richard Westin was arrested on September 14th. He was released on bail the next day. $1 million. His lawyer was expensive. His suits were expensive. His watch was expensive. He lived in a 5-bedroom house in Palos Verdes. He drove a Mercedes. He belonged to a country club. While Margaret had been sleeping 3 hours a night for 19 years, Richard Westin had been playing golf. While she had taped her bleeding fingers and worked through back pain, he had been dining at restaurants that cost more per meal than she earned in a week. While she had saved $43,000 $1 at a time, he had stolen $47 million. The trial was set for June 1990, 8 months away. Margaret followed every piece of news. She bought newspapers. She watched every television report. She learned everything about Richard Westin. He was 54 years old. He had graduated from USC. He had started in banking in 1963. He had been president of Pacific Heritage for 12 years. He had 3 adult children. He had been married for 30 years. His wife's name was Patricia. She was on the board of a children's charity. The irony was not lost on Margaret. Patricia Westin helped children. Richard Westin stole from mothers trying to bring their children to America. Margaret learned about the regulatory system, how it was supposed to work, how it had failed. Auditors who had been paid to look the other way. Regulators who had been too understaffed to catch the fraud. A system designed to protect banks, not depositors. She learned about bankruptcy law. If the bank went into liquidation, depositors might recover pennies on the dollar. Maybe 10 cents. Maybe 5. Maybe nothing. For Margaret's $43,000, she might get $4,000 back, if she was lucky. If the process did not take years. If the lawyers did not take it all in fees. Margaret made a decision. She was not going to wait for the system to deliver justice. The system had already failed. The system had allowed Richard Westin to steal for 5 years. The system had released him on bail so he could go home to his mansion while she tried to figure out how to pay rent. The system did not care about her. It never had. But Margaret was done being invisible. She had spent 19 years being quiet, being patient, being obedient, doing what she was told, following the rules. And where had it gotten her? She had nothing. She had worked 60,000 hours over 19 years. She had saved $43,000, and a man in an expensive suit had erased it all in one morning. No, Not anymore. Margaret started going to the library. She spent hours reading. Not novels, not newspapers. Legal books, business books, books about banking regulations and fraud prosecution and media relations. She learned how the system worked, every detail, every loophole, every weakness. She learned about the discovery process, about depositions, about subpoenas, about how to file complaints with regulatory agencies, about how to contact journalists, about how to organize people. She had worked 2 jobs for 19 years. She was very good at working. Now she had a new job, destroying Richard Westin. She started with the other depositors. She had a list. The court records were public, 638 names and addresses. Margaret went door to door. She knocked on every single door. She introduced herself. She told her story. She asked for theirs. Most people were angry but resigned. They had already accepted that they would never see their money again. They were immigrants. They knew how the system worked, or did not work. They knew people like Richard Westin did not go to prison. They paid fines. They lost their licenses. But they kept their houses and their cars and their country club memberships. Margaret told them they were wrong. She told them there was another way. She told them that if they worked together, they could do something. They could make noise. They could make this impossible to ignore. She had learned something in 19 years of being invisible. People in power only paid attention when you forced them to. It was time to force them. Margaret organized a group, 218 depositors. They met in the community room of a church in Chinatown. Margaret stood in front of them. She had never spoken to a large group before. Her English was still broken, but her voice was strong. She told them her story. $43,000, 19 years. A daughter she had not seen since she was 4 years old. A daughter who was now 23. A daughter who was supposed to come to America in 1 month. A reunion that would never happen because Richard Westin had stolen Margaret's life. The room was silent. Then an elderly man stood up. He said he had lost $18,000, his son's college fund. A woman stood up, $31,000, her restaurant fund. One by one, people stood up. They shared their numbers, their dreams. By the end of the meeting, Margaret had calculated the total. The 218 people in that room had lost over $9 million combined. $9 million in that room alone. Richard Westin had not just stolen money. He had stolen futures. Margaret told the group what she had learned. The trial would take months, maybe years. The lawyers would get paid first. There would be nothing left. But there was another way. Pressure, media, protests. Make it impossible for Westin to hide. Make it impossible for the prosecutors to offer a lenient deal. Make it impossible for the judge to show mercy. Make this so public, so painful, so visible, that the system would have no choice but to deliver real justice. The group agreed. They would follow Margaret's lead. The protests started in October. Every Saturday, the group gathered outside Richard Westin's house in Palos Verdes. They stood on the sidewalk. They held signs. They chanted. They told their stories to any reporter who would listen. At first, no one came. But Margaret was persistent. She called every television station, every newspaper, every radio show. She told them there was a story. Hundreds of immigrants, mostly elderly, mostly working class, robbed by a wealthy banker. The American dream stolen by American greed. Eventually, a reporter came. Then another. Then another. By November, there were news vans outside Westin's house every Saturday. The footage made its way to local news, then regional, then national. Margaret became the face of the story. The woman who had saved for 19 years to bring her daughter to America. The woman who lost everything. The woman who was fighting back. She gave interviews. Dozens of them. Her English was imperfect, but her message was clear. Richard Westin had stolen from people who could not afford to lose. He had stolen their futures, and he needed to pay, not with money. Money would not bring back 19 years. He needed to pay with his freedom. He needed to go to prison. He needed to lose his comfort the way he had made them lose theirs. The pressure worked. The prosecutor's office started receiving thousands of calls, letters, emails, from across the country. People were angry. The story resonated. It was not just about banking fraud. It was about class, about privilege. about a system that protected people like Richard Westin and crushed people like Margaret Chen. The prosecutor, a woman named Lisa Fernandez, called a press conference in December. She stood at a podium and announced that her office would be seeking the maximum sentence for Richard Westin: 10 years in federal prison, full restitution to all depositors, and a lifetime ban from working in banking. It was everything Margaret had asked for. The trial began in June 1990. Margaret attended every single day. She sat in the front row. She stared at Richard Westin. He never looked at her. Not once. His lawyers argued that he had made mistakes, poor decisions, but not intentional fraud. They argued he had been trying to save the bank. They argued he had not personally benefited. The prosecutors brought out the evidence: the house, the cars, the country club, the vacations to Europe, the yacht he kept in Marina del Rey. Richard Westin had personally benefited to the tune of $3.2 million, money that had come from the depositors, money that had come from people like Margaret. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Margaret sat through all of it. She listened to the testimony: the auditors who admitted they had been bribed, the business partners who admitted the development projects had been fake, the accountant who admitted the books had been falsified, the regulatory official who admitted he had not done his job. A system of corruption and negligence that had allowed one man to steal $47 million. On July 3, 1990, the jury came back. Guilty on all counts: wire fraud, bank fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. Richard Westin stood as the verdict was read. His face went white. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder. The judge set sentencing for August 15th. Margaret walked out of the courthouse. Reporters surrounded her. They asked how she felt. Margaret said she felt nothing yet. Justice was not a verdict. Justice was a sentence. She would wait. On August 15th, Margaret returned to the courthouse. The courtroom was packed. Over 100 depositors, all of them waiting. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The judge sat. Everyone sat. The judge looked at Richard Westin. She said she had read all the victim impact statements, over 300 of them. She said she had been a judge for 22 years. She had never seen fraud on this scale that had caused this much human suffering. She said Richard Westin had not just stolen money. He had stolen lives, futures, dreams. He had stolen from people who had trusted him, people who had worked harder than he could ever imagine, people who deserved better from their country and their banks. She said the law allowed for a maximum sentence of 10 years. She was imposing the maximum. 10 years in federal prison. No parole. Full restitution to be paid from the sale of all assets. And a lifetime ban from working in financial services. Richard Westin's face crumpled. His wife sobbed in the gallery. His children looked shocked. Margaret felt something release in her chest. Not happiness. Not satisfaction. Something else. Completion. The judge banged her gavel. Court was adjourned. Richard Westin's house was sold at auction. The cars. The yacht. The country club membership was terminated. His pension was seized. His bank accounts were frozen. Every asset was liquidated. The total came to $4.7 million, divided among 638 depositors. Margaret received $7,312, not $43,000, not close, but more than the nothing she had expected. She took the money. She went to the immigration lawyer, the same one she had paid $10,000 over the years. She asked if they could restart her daughter's application. The lawyer looked at her. He said he was sorry. He said Lily was 23 now, an adult. The process was different. It would cost more. It would take longer. And there was no guarantee. Margaret asked how much. The lawyer said $15,000, maybe more. Margaret had $7,312. She asked if he could work with that. The lawyer said no. Margaret stood up. She thanked him for his time. She left. She walked to the bus stop. She sat on the bench. She realized something. She had won. Richard Westin was in prison. He had lost everything. He would spend the next decade in a concrete cell learning what it felt like to have your freedom taken away. Margaret had done that. She had organized. She had fought. She had made noise. She had forced the system to pay attention. She had won. But Lily was still in China. Margaret was still alone. The 19 years were still gone. Victory tasted like metal in her mouth. Margaret went back to work. The factory had held her job. She started sewing buttons again. Her hands still hurt. Her back still ached. But the work was familiar. It was something she knew how to do. She moved to a smaller apartment, 1 room, cheaper, $450 a month. She started saving again. Not for Lily. That dream was gone. She saved because it was what she knew how to do, because sitting still felt like death. She saved because every dollar was proof that Richard Westin had not destroyed her completely. Over the next 5 years, Margaret saved $18,000. She never went back to the immigration lawyer. She wrote to her parents. She asked them to tell Lily that she was sorry, that she had tried, that she had lost, that she hoped Lily could forgive her. Her parents wrote back. They said Lily understood. She had graduated from university. She had a job. She was engaged. She was building a life. Margaret was happy for her daughter. She was also devastated. Lily did not need her anymore. Maybe she never had. Margaret had sacrificed 19 years for a reunion that would never happen, for a dream that had been a fantasy from the start. You could not pause motherhood for 19 years and expect to resume it. You could not ask a child to wait while you worked yourself to death on the other side of the world. You could not build a relationship with someone through photographs and letters. Margaret had thought money could buy back time. She had been wrong. Money could buy many things, but not that. Never that. In 1997, Margaret received a letter. It was from China. The handwriting was unfamiliar. She opened it carefully. It was from Lily. The first direct communication in 27 years. The letter was short. Lily said she was married now. She had a son. His name was Wei. He was 2 years old. She had seen the news coverage of the trial. Someone had sent her newspaper clippings. She had read about Margaret, about the $43,000, about the 19 years of savings, about the protests, about the fight. Lily said she had always known her mother was strong, but she had not known how strong. She said she was proud. She said she understood now why Margaret had left, why she had stayed away. She said she was not angry anymore. She was sad. Sad for both of them. Sad for all the years they had lost, but not angry. She said maybe one day they could meet, when Wei was older, when they could afford the trip, when the time was right. Margaret read the letter 7 times. Then she folded it. She put it in the shoebox with the photographs. She sat on her bed. She cried for the first time since the morning the bank closed. She cried for 19 years, for $43,000, for all the mornings she woke up at 5:30, for all the nights she worked until 6 a.m., for all the buttons she sewed, for all the floors she cleaned, for all the pain she endured, for the daughter she lost, for the years she would never get back, for the woman she could have been if Richard Westin had not stolen her life. She cried until there was nothing left. Margaret Chen is 68 years old now. She still lives in Los Angeles. She retired from the garment factory 8 years ago. Her hands do not work well anymore. Arthritis. She lives on Social Security, $742 a month. She has a small apartment, 1 room, a hot plate, a mini fridge that still makes that grinding noise. She has never met her daughter in person. She has never met her grandson. They talk on the phone sometimes, once a month. The conversations are awkward, polite. They are strangers who share DNA and a tragedy. Lily lives in Shanghai now. She is a teacher. She has a good life. Margaret is happy for her. From a distance. Richard Westin was released from federal prison in August 2000. He served 10 years. When he was released, reporters tried to interview him. He refused to comment. He moved to Arizona. He lives in a small house. He works as a consultant for a company owned by his son. He has rebuilt his life, not to where it was, but enough. Comfortable. Safe. The law says he paid his debt. 10 years of freedom for $47 million, for 638 destroyed lives, for Margaret's 19 years. The math does not balance. It never does. Margaret does not think about Richard Westin anymore, or she tries not to. Some nights when sleep will not come, she wonders what he thinks about, if he remembers the faces of the people he destroyed, if he feels guilt, if he ever thinks about the woman who saved for 19 years and lost it in a morning. She doubts it. Men like Richard Westin do not waste time on regret. They move forward. They rebuild. They survive. Just like Margaret. Except Margaret never had the luxury of starting with millions. She started with nothing. She built $43,000 $1 at a time, and when it was stolen, she built something else. She built a movement. She built accountability. She built a case that sent a banker to prison. She built proof that even invisible people can make noise if they are angry enough, if they are determined enough, if they are willing to fight. The truth about revenge is this: it does not heal you. It does not bring back what you lost. Margaret's $43,000 is gone. Her 19 years are gone. Her daughter is a stranger. Her body is broken. Her life is small. Revenge did not change any of that. But revenge was not about healing. It was about balance. Richard Westin took from her. She took from him. He stole her money. She stole his freedom. Not equivalent, not even close, but something. Proof that actions have consequences. Proof that the system can be forced to care if you make enough noise. Proof that invisible people are only invisible if they stay silent. Margaret stopped being silent. That is her victory. Not the $7,000 she recovered. Not the sentence she helped secure. Her victory was refusing to disappear. Refusing to be one more unnamed victim in a news story. Refusing to let Richard Westin steal her voice along with her savings. She made him see her. She made everyone see her. The woman who saved for 19 years. The woman who lost it in a morning. The woman who fought back. That story is hers. No one can steal it. No one can erase it. It is the one thing she built that no one can take away. Margaret's story is not unique. Between 1986 and 1995, over 1,000 savings and loan institutions failed in the United States. The total cost to taxpayers was $160 billion. Most of the bank executives responsible were never prosecuted. Those who were received minimal sentences. The depositors, mostly working-class Americans, lost everything. Most never recovered. Most never fought back. But one woman in Detroit did. Her name was Eleanor Price. She lost $57,000 when her bank collapsed. She was 61 years old, a widow. That money was supposed to be her retirement. When the bank president was sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security facility, Eleanor decided that was not enough. She spent the next 12 years building a case, not against the banker. He had already been sentenced. Against the regulators who had ignored the warning signs. Against the auditors who had falsified reports. Against the system itself. In 2007, she won. A landmark settlement that changed oversight requirements for savings institutions nationwide. She recovered nothing for herself. By then, she was 73. The money was gone. But the system had changed. Other people would be protected. That story is for another time.